Hey everybody, what's going on? Thanks for swinging by. I sure do appreciate it. If this is your first time with the channel, my name is Mark.
Oh, hi Mark.
Welcome to Fit and Fire. Let's get into this video. I did a poll on the channel here just, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 days ago, and asked you guys what is the next video that you wanted to see, and overwhelmingly you said that you wanted to see this video, the comparison of the Palmetto State Armory AKS-74U Krink versus the Zastava M85. And I've really wanted to do this video as well, but I have a whole bunch of different projects and I'm trying to make sure that I get you guys what you want to see as quickly as possible. With that being said, full disclaimer before I get into this video, I'm not getting paid to say anything good, bad, or indifferent on either one of these firearms. I really like Zastava. I've got an M70, I've got an M92, an M90, and now an M85 as well. And I also like Palmetto State Armory as well. And I get a little bit of grief about that, but I also understand that Palmetto State Armory is trying to make sure that they provide budget firearms for everybody, regardless of who they are. So this will be an interesting look into the differences between these two, and I just wanted to throw that out there for you guys to make sure that I'm trying to stay as neutral as possible, even though I really like Zastava, but I also really like PSA as well. So let's dive into it. First, starting off with the Zastava M85. This is going to be based off of the M70, which seems kind of odd, but this did start off as the M70, which is going to be the 7.62x39 Yugo pattern AK-47. Fast forward to 1985, the Yugoslavians then ended up developing the M85, which is going to be a shortened version of the M70, chambered in 5.56. From there, they ended up making the M90, which is going to be a longer barreled version of the M85, and then the M92, 7.62x39 version of the M70. So let's dive into some of the features of this. The first thing that we're going to talk about is this brake on here. Normally they come with these boosters on the muzzle here, but I wanted to switch up that to this JMac Customs Chemo 360 brake because I have been swapping the Resilient Putnik back and forth between the M85 and the PSA Krink. So that's the only thing that I've changed on either one of these. So just keep that in mind. This is going to be a 10-inch chrome line hammer forged barrel set into a bulged front trunnion on a 1.5 millimeter receiver. This is going to have a hinged dust cover, and some of the earlier models didn't have a Picatinny section in between the rear sight here and the hinge. And a lot of people were just drilling and tapping a pick section on there to be able to put a red dot. So this is going to be how you would mount a red dot on the M85, since it does not have a rail, an optics mount rail on the side here. So that is one of the things that we've seen a adaptation of in the last, I would say, I don't know, 5, 8 years. So there is that. You're going to have your standard Yugo pattern pistol grip on this, and actually like it. That's one of the things that I really do like about these pistol grips. A lot of people will swap them out to something else like a US Palm or something like that, but I actually prefer these. So there's that. One of the great things about this particular M85 is that it will accept the AK-74 magazines no problem. I also have a Bakelite AK-74. It fits no problem. Obviously the Zastava polymer and steel mags fit just fine. And then the AC Unity mags also fit real well as well. So that's something I really do like about the M85, is that it's pretty versatile when it comes to the magazines and being able to accept pretty much a lot of the different variations. Got a pick section on the back here for this SB Tactical triangle folding brace. So if I can there we go, get that up. It's a little stiff, but there we go. We got that nice and collapsed. So you can see that this folds down really nice for storage or transportation. So that's something I have really enjoyed. Trigger on this is pretty nice. This is fairly new. This rifle hasn't been shot much at all. So yeah, this one feels really, really good. I really do like the trigger on this. Now, I've had an M85 on the channel in the past, and unfortunately I had to let that one go. I sold it to a really, really good friend of mine, but I couldn't stay away. I had to come back. So as soon as my local shop, American Cash Exchange, huge fans of the channel and great supporters, I really couldn't do a lot of things with this channel without their help. They had one of these come into the shop, and I immediately jumped on it and went ahead and purchased it. So had to get it back into the collection. So there you have it, the M85, just a quick overview of that. And man, this has been a lot of fun to shoot. So let's switch over to the PSA Krink. And this is going to be their adaptation of the AKS-74U. Now, again, I know that there's a lot of purists out there that says that neither one of these are Krinks, and I got you, I hear you, but I don't have $3,500 or $4,000 to source an actual Krink kit and then have it built. So for those of us who don't have insane amounts of money to purchase something like that, this is going to be something that's going to be pretty close to it. Now, this is actually going to probably resemble more of the Bulgarian version of the Krinkov than the Russian version, but at the end of the day, again, this is going to be pretty close. As you can see here on the muzzle, I have, again, switched it over to one of the JMac Customs Chemo 360 brakes, and, you know, it does just fine. So I really do appreciate that. So where this differs from the M85 is this is going to have an 8.4-inch 4150 steel nitrated barrel. So some of you may not like that because it's steel instead of cold hammer forged, but you know, depending on how much you're actually going to shoot, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. Naturally, PSA has gone over to forged components, so your front trunnion is going to be forged with the bolt and carrier. It's going to be a 1mm stamped receiver, so there is that. I have had pretty good success with magazines and accepting these AK-74 mags with the pod arm follower, so no problem there. It did accept the Bakelite mag. It was a little tight, but it accepted it, no problem. Obviously, the PSA mags, it likes the best. No feeding issues with the PSA mags. Even when I got this from H-Town Werewolf, he said that the PSA mags were running really, really good with it. And then the one magazine that I did have trouble with was the AC Unity. Naturally, you can kind of file down the lugs on the magazine for it to fit, but at the end of the day, I didn't really want to do that because I knew that, A, this is not going to stay in my collection because it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to H-Town Werewolf, and I really do appreciate him letting me borrow this.
That's fine.
And my AC Unity mags fit into my Zastavas just fine, so I didn't really want to mess with that. One of the things that PSA has done to kind of modernize this compared to a standard Krink is that they have put a mounting system on the side here for like an RS Regulator or a Midwest Industries side mount for a red dot. So you have the ability to run a red dot on this, whereas an actual Krink you couldn't do that. In addition to that, they have added their enhanced safety lever here, so you can actuate it with your index finger, which that thing is perfectly tuned. I'm barely moving that at all. And then the trigger on this is pretty decent, I would say. It's not too bad. I think that the Zastava is a little bit better, a little bit lighter, just a little bit, but they're both pretty nice for an AK and stock triggers at that. All right, so there's a quick overview of the PSA Krink. Now, I personally have not had any issues when it comes to shooting this. It has had zero reliability issues when it comes to feed fire or ejecting, but that hasn't always been the case. H-Town Werewolf did have issues with this feeding steel case ammo, and for an AK, that's kind of a problem. So he took a brass brush and went in and just cleaned out that chamber really well, and then polished it up as well, and that seems to have corrected the problem. I've only been able to run 30 rounds of steel case through this, but it had no problems whatsoever. So there is that piece of it. However, I do also know that Blue Jean Operator has had issues with his Krink. Now, again, I can't really judge, you know, what's going on with his based off of mine, because this is my sample. I don't know what he's done with his. So just keep that in mind. But there are plenty of examples of people having issues with their PSA Krinks. So be mindful of that. I would hope that at this point, after this being out on the market for, you know, better part of a year at this point, that they will have this pretty much corrected and running very well. But again, that's been kind of one of the issues with PSA, is their quality control standards. So just keep all of that in mind. Now, when looking at the Zastava M85, I have had zero issues whatsoever. Of the two that I have had, I've got about 800 rounds, which is a little lopsided when comparing these two, because I have less than 1,000 rounds through two M85s, where I have 2,000 rounds through the PSA. But at the end of the day, I don't think that that really is going to matter very much. We've seen very little wear and tear on the internals for the PSA. Pretty much what you would expect for a rifle or a firearm at 2,000 rounds. This, you know, is fairly new. I've only got a couple hundred rounds through it, but even between those two, didn't see much wear that would be concerning. Even with my M90, I haven't seen very much wear with it, and it has 1,500 rounds through it. So I would say, if I was to compare the M90 and its wear pattern versus the PSA Krink, the M90 is a little bit better, but it's 500 rounds less. So just keep all of that in mind. However, what I will say is I have never had any issues with either one of my M85s and any type of ammunition. It has fired brass and steel, no problem whatsoever. It's accepted every magazine that I've put through it. So there is that. All right, so let's talk about the shooting experiences between these two. They're pretty similar. A 10-inch or less barreled 5.56 223 firearm is going to be a little snappy, but when you add on this resilient Putnik to the end of either one of these, it really tamps down that recoil and muzzle rise as well. So being able to put several shots on target had been not a non-issue for either one of these. So I would say that they're about the same. If anything, surprisingly enough, I would say that the Zastava was a little bit snappier, just ever so slightly, at least to my opinion, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But, and this should shock no one at this point, is the accuracy. If we look at the accuracy of the PSA, at 50 yards, I started off with M193, and the groups were not very good. They were sitting over 5 inches. I mean, they're 5.5 inches with M193. Transition to Frontier 75 grain boat tail hollow points, and we're getting a little bit better. I think it was closer to maybe 4.5-ish range on those groups, but yeah, still not very good. Switching over to the Zastava M85 with its 10-inch cold hammer forged chrome lined barrel, the groups dialed in a lot better. Just sighting this in at 25 yards, I was able to put rounds, you know, within a quarter of each other, which is exactly what I was used to when I was in the military, zeroing my M16. Moving back at 50 yards. The groups were, I would say, right around 4 inches with M193. Obviously, you guys will see the video here. I'm just going off of memory. And then switching over to Frontier, the same Frontier 75 grain boat tail hollow points, we were getting a tighter group, more so like 3 inches at 50 yards. So this was more accurate than the PSA. Now, one thing I will say in the PSA's defense is I did run it in a 2-gun match and was able to get a second round impact at 300 yards under time, under stress. So that's kudos to it. However, the M85, I think, would do even better. I would imagine that I could probably replicate that if I would have been able to do that at that time. So take all of that as my opinions on this, but at the end of the day, I do feel that this is going to be a little bit more accurate than the PSA Krink. Now, we've already kind of talked about mounting optics. You have a pick section here for this EOTech that I've put on here. I've noticed no issues when it comes to this moving around or anything like that. So I'm confident that this is locked up really, really well. Whereas the PSA has that side mount that you can put like a RS Regulate on there. And a lot of people may prefer that as a more stable zeroing platform for your red dot. So there is that aspect of it. But at the end of the day, I don't think that this is going to be an issue here. So just keep that in mind. It will keep this a little bit slimmer if that's even a consideration for you, but for a lot of people, it's not. All right, so let's talk about aftermarket. With the M85, we have seen an explosion of aftermarket over the last, I would say, probably 5 or 6 years. We've seen more and more companies offer Yugo pattern handguards or other, pistol grips or whatever the case may be, to kind of make this your own. Personally, I like the wood handguards and stuff like that, but if that's not you and you want to hang all the different types of lights and lasers off the front end, you definitely can do that. So people like RS Regulate and JMac Customs and even Midwest Industries have really expanded their offerings to make sure that the M85 and the Yugo pattern Zastava line has a lot of aftermarket support. In comparison, the PSA already has a lot of aftermarket support, even though it's still fairly new. Now, the Krink is not new, but I know that there's going to be a lot of different tolerances when it comes to measurements on the PSA. So JMac Customs has already come out with their MMS handguard system for the Krink, for the PSA Krink, and it looks really, really nice. Aftermarket support is not going to be that big of an issue, depending on what you're trying to accomplish between this and the M85. Now, at the end of the day, what is my conclusion on all of this? At the end of the day, for me personally, based off of what I'm looking for in a firearm, I need my firearms to be something more than just a range toy. And that's why I would have to lean towards the M85 because of its reliability, its ability to accept different types of magazines easily, and its accuracy as well. That's what I have found to be most rewarding when it comes to the M85. So I feel that I would grab this before the PSA. Now, if you've already purchased the PSA, that's great. And if you feel that that's going to work for you, that's fine too. I would say go for it. Make sure that you are closely watching all of the wear to make sure that it's not wearing prematurely. I would highly suggest, touching up that chamber a little bit with a brass brush and then some polishing compound. But at the end of the day, if that's what you want to run, I think that that's fine too. But for me personally, the M85 is where I would like to go because I am a big fan of Zastava. That may be some of my bias talking, but I've also seen that this is more accurate, and for me, accuracy is king. when it comes to a firearm. So I would definitely choose this over the PSA. All right, so that's going to cover it for my comparison between the M85 and the PSA Krink. Obviously, both of them are really cool. My preference is towards the M85, but did I get it right? Let me know down in the comment section down below. Which one do you prefer? Tell me why you prefer one or the other. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about that. Naturally, I'm going to do a lot more content with the M85. I'm going to try to get it into a 2-gun match in the spring and get the round count up higher so we can take a look at the wear and tear. In addition to that, with the PSA, I'm also going to get it up to that 2,500 round mark so we can also see the wear and tear, with a lot of it being run suppressed as well. So with all that being said, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Thanks so much. We'll catch you guys next time. As always, freedom through strength. Here comes a high five. Bye, y'all.